The wind carried nothing but dust across the New Mexico territory that autumn of 1878. Elias Carter stood on the porch of his ranch house, watching the sun bleed out across the horizon, same as it had every evening for the past 3 years. The land stretched endless before him, scrubland and mesa, dotted with cattle that grazed on whatever stubborn grass pushed through the hardpan earth. He was 42 years old and felt twice that. His hands, once steady enough to gentle a spooked mare, now trembled slightly when he rolled his evening cigarette. The ranch hands had gone to their quarters an hour past, leaving him alone with the silence that had become his only reliable companion. The house behind him stood like a monument to better days, 2 stories of adobe and timber, built when he'd still believed in tomorrow. Sarah had chosen the spot herself, insisted on the wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. "For watching our children grow," she'd said, her hand on her belly, round with their first. That child, their Margaret, would have been 7 this winter, had the fever not taken her and her mother both in the span of 3 days. Elias drew smoke into his lungs, held it until it burned. The evening ritual never changed: check the ledgers, inspect the stock, eat whatever cold meal Rosa left covered on the stove, then stand here until the stars forced him inside. He'd become a man of habits, each one a small wall between himself and the memories that prowled the empty rooms. Inside, the house echoed with absence. He'd kept everything as Sarah left it, her sewing basket by the window, Margaret's wooden horse on the mantel. The ranch hands thought him touched. Perhaps. Let them think it. A man was entitled to his ghosts. He moved through the kitchen, lifting the cloth from his supper. Beans and salt pork, same as yesterday. As he ate, standing at the counter, he could almost hear Sarah's voice chiding him about proper table manners. But the dining table was covered in dust sheets now, had been since the day they'd carried out the second small coffin. The ledgers waited in his study, columns of numbers that meant less each season. The ranch still turned profit his foreman, Jake Morrison. Saw to that. But Elias found it hard to care whether they drove 500 head to market or 5,000. Money piled up in the territorial bank, untouched and unwanted. He worked until his eyes strained in the lamplight, then climbed the stairs to his bedroom. Sarah's dresses still hung in the wardrobe. Her hairbrush still lay on the dresser, a few dark strands caught in the bristles. He'd meant to pack these things away, had even brought up a trunk for the purpose. That was 2 years ago. The empty trunk still sat in the corner, accusation and confession both. Sleep, when it came, was restless and thin. He dreamed of Margaret's laugh, of Sarah's hands floured white from baking. He woke, as always, just before dawn, his throat tight with grief that time had done nothing to ease. The morning routine began before the sun touched the mountains. Coffee, black and bitter. A walk through the corrals, checking water troughs and fence lines. His foreman would handle these tasks, but Elias needed the work, needed his body tired enough that his mind might rest. "Morning, Mr. Carter." Jake touched his hat brim, fell into step beside him. They'd worked together 15 years, long enough that Jake knew when to speak and when to hold silence. "That new hand working out?" Elias asked, more for something to say than from real interest. "Well enough. Knows horses better than cattle. But he'll learn." Jake paused, cleared his throat. "The boys were wondering if you'd be coming to the harvest dance next month. Miller's barn, like always." Elias kept walking. The harvest dance. Sarah had loved to dance. Would practice steps in the kitchen while supper cooked. "I'll think on it," he said, knowing he wouldn't. The day passed like every other mending tack, reviewing breeding records, watching the hands work cattle in the near pasture. The sun climbed its arc, relentless and indifferent. By late afternoon, Elias found himself back on the porch, earlier than usual. The light slanted golden across the desert, transforming the harsh landscape into something almost beautiful. That's when he saw them. 2 figures on the road, walking. No, 3, a woman carrying something, and a child beside her. They moved slowly, the woman's steps uneven. Travelers weren't uncommon on this road, it being the main route between Las Cruces and the smaller settlements north. But something about these figures held his attention. Perhaps the way the woman kept touching the child's shoulder, as if reassuring herself he was still there. Perhaps the way they stayed to the very edge of the road, ready to bolt into the brush. They drew closer, and Elias could make out more details. The woman was young, maybe 25, with the dark skin and high cheekbones that spoke of mixed blood, Mexican and Indian both. From the look of her, her dress was travel-stained and patched, her hair bound back in a faded cloth. The child, a boy of perhaps 4 or 5, had his mother's coloring but lighter, his hair touched with copper where the sun caught it. What the woman carried was a bundle, probably everything they owned wrapped in a blanket. They were 50 yards out when the woman stumbled, caught herself, kept walking. The boy tugged at her skirt, pointed at the ranch house. She shook her head, pulled him along. But Elias could see the exhaustion in her movements, the way her shoulders curved forward under their burden. He found himself stepping off the porch, walking toward the gate. He hadn't made the decision consciously. His body simply moved. The woman saw him coming and stopped, pushing the boy behind her. Her free hand went to her waist, checking for a knife. Maybe, or just habit. "Evening," Elias called, stopping a respectful distance away. The woman's eyes were dark, wary. The boy peered around her skirts with the fearless curiosity of childhood. "Evening," she replied. Her English carried an accent but was clear enough. She stood straight despite her obvious fatigue, chin raised slightly. Pride. Then, he knew something about that. "Long way to anywhere from here," he said, keeping his voice neutral. "You folks heading someplace particular?" The woman's jaw tightened. "North," she said simply. North could mean anywhere Colorado territory. Maybe, or the mining camps in the mountains. Places where a woman of mixed blood might find work, might disappear into the crowd of fortune seekers and desperados. Places where questions weren't asked too closely. "Sun'll be down soon," Elias observed. The boy had stepped out slightly, staring openly at him now. His clothes were clean but threadbare, his feet bare and dusty from the road. "We know," the woman said. Her voice carried a thread of steel despite its softness. "We'll make camp off the road." Camp, with a child and whatever meager supplies she carried. The nights were turning cold already, frost touching the ground before dawn. Elias felt something shift in his chest, rusty and painful, like a door opening after years sealed shut. "Ranch house has empty rooms," he heard himself say. "Work, too, if you're looking. Can't pay much, but there's board included." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, searching his face, looking for the trap, the price that would come later. "What kind of work?" "Kitchen work, mainly. Some mending. Current cook only comes 3 days a week." This was true. Rosa had been after him to hire daily help, claiming her bones were too old for the ride from town. "I have the boy," she said, as if that settled it, as if no respectable place would take them both. "Plenty of room," Elias said. He found he meant it. The house was too big for one man and his ghosts. He'd need to stay clear of the working stock, but there's no harm in a child about the place. Still, she hesitated, pride warring with necessity. The boy tugged at her skirt again, whispered something in Spanish. She hushed him gently, never taking her eyes off Elias. "Why?" she asked finally. It was a fair question. Why offer shelter to strangers? And mixed blood strangers at that his neighbors would talk. The hands would speculate. In these territories, the lines between white and brown, between acceptable and outcast, were drawn sharp as fence wire. "House is too quiet," he said, which was true enough. "And I've no love for seeing folks sleep rough when there's walls and a roof standing empty." She studied him a moment longer, then nodded once, sharply. "We work for our keep, both of us." "Fair enough." He turned, started back toward the gate. After a moment, he heard their footsteps following. The boy whispered again, excited now. His mother answered in the same language, her tone cautioning. Elias led them through the front door, an action that would scandalize Rosa when she heard of it. Hired help used the back entrance, always, but something about taking them through the kitchen felt wrong. Too much like what others would do. The woman stood in the front hall, taking in the good furniture, the carpets Sarah had ordered from Kansas City, the photographs on the wall. Her bundle seemed smaller against the backdrop of plenty. Kitchen's through there, Elias said, pointing. Rooms above it, used to be for the house staff, haven't been occupied in some time, but they're clean. Rosa, that's the cook, she sees to that. Thank you, the woman said quietly. The boy had pressed against her side again, overwhelmed by the strange surroundings. What do I call you? Elias asked. She straightened again, that flash of pride. I am Marisol Rivera. This is my son, Diego. Elias Carter. He nodded to the boy, who buried his face in his mother's skirts. I'll show you the rooms. He led them up the narrow back stairs, noting how Marisol moved tired but alert, cataloging exits and obstacles, the behavior of someone who'd learned not to trust easily. At the top, a short hallway led to 3 small rooms, each with a bed, washstand, and window overlooking the kitchen garden. Take your pick, he said. Water pumps in the kitchen, privies out back. Breakfast is at dawn, lunch at noon, supper when the work's done. Marisol set down her bundle on the nearest bed, ran her hand over the quilt as if testing its reality. We start tomorrow. Tomorrow, he agreed. He turned to go, then paused. There's cold meat and bread in the kitchen, if you're hungry. We've eaten, she said quickly. Too quickly. The boy's stomach chose that moment to growl audibly. Well, Elias said, not looking at them directly. Might be some milk going to waste, and Rosa always makes too much cornbread. He left before she could respond, taking the main stairs down. In his study, he sat at his desk but didn't open the ledgers. Instead, he found himself listening to the quiet sounds from above footsteps, the scrape of a chair, soft voices in Spanish. For the first time in 3 years, the house held more than just him and his ghosts. Outside, full dark had fallen. He didn't go to the porch for his evening smoke. Instead, he sat in Sarah's parlor, in the chair he'd avoided since the funeral. The sounds from upstairs continued water splashing. The boy's laugh quickly hushed, the creak of floorboards as they settled in. He'd hired them out of pity. That's what he told himself as he finally climbed the stairs to his own bed. Christian charity. Nothing more. The fact that the house already felt different, less empty, less like a tomb that was just coincidence. The fact that he found himself thinking of tomorrow's breakfast, wondering if the boy liked eggs, meant nothing at all. But as he lay in the dark, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of life in his house, Elias knew he was lying to himself. He'd seen something in Marisol Rivera's eyes, something that echoed his own grief, and the boy was close to the age Margaret would have been. He'd hired them out of pity. Yes, but perhaps not just pity for them. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows, somewhere in the walls. The house settled and sighed. And for the first time in 3 years, Elias Carter fell asleep without checking the locks, without walking through the empty rooms, without standing on the porch to smoke himself numb. He slept. And if he dreamed, he didn't remember it come morning. Dawn came gray and cool, the mountains still dark against the lightening sky. Elias woke to an unfamiliar sound, footsteps in the kitchen below, quiet and careful. For a moment, confusion held him. Then he remembered the woman and her boy, Marisol Rivera. He dressed quickly, descended the stairs. In the kitchen, he found her already at work, the stove crackling with new fire. She'd tied her hair back tight, covered it with a clean cloth. An apron, one of Rosa's, left on its hook wrapped around her dress. The boy sat at the small table near the window, legs swinging, watching his mother work. "Mr. Carter." She noticed him, nodded without pausing in her movements. "Coffee will be ready soon." "You didn't need to start so early," he said, though the smell of brewing coffee was welcome. "Early is when work begins." She cracked eggs into a bowl, her movements efficient. "Rosa left these. She brings them from her own chickens, takes what we don't use back to town." He found himself standing awkwardly in his own kitchen, unsure where to put himself. Usually he took coffee standing at the counter, maybe a cold biscuit before heading out. "Sit," Marisol said. Not quite in order, but close. "Food is better hot." Elias sat at the main kitchen table, feeling strange about it. The boy watched him with those dark eyes, curious but cautious, up close. Elias could see the child was thin, but not starved, clean despite their time on the road. His mother had taken care with him. "What's your name, son?" Elias asked gently. The boy looked to his mother, who nodded. "Diego?" he whispered. "That's a fine name. How old are you?" "Diego." The boy held up 5 fingers, proud of the accomplishment. 5 years old. That's a good age. Margaret would have been 7, would have been learning her letters, helping her mother in the garden. Elias pushed the thought away. Marisol set a plate before him: eggs, bacon she'd found in the cold box, toast from yesterday's bread warmed on the stove. Simple food but carefully prepared. The eggs soft, the bacon crisp. She poured coffee, black and strong. "You're not eating?" he asked. "After," she said, returning to the stove. There was a rhythm to her movements, practiced and sure. This was a woman who'd kept house before, who knew her way around a kitchen. The ranch hands would expect breakfast soon. Elias wondered how they'd react to Marisol. Some wouldn't care if food was food. Others, though. Tom Garrett especially had opinions about Mexicans, Indians, anyone who wasn't what he called pure American stock. "The hands eat in the cookhouse," he said. "Rosa usually sends food over, but if you'd rather not—" "I cook, they eat," Marisol interrupted. "Is no different." But it was different, and they both knew it. A Mexican woman, or part Indian, the hands would have words for her. Not all of them said quiet. Still, she'd asked for work. He'd not insult her by suggesting she couldn't handle it. Jake Morrison was first through the door, stopping short when he saw Marisol at the stove. His eyes took in the scene: Elias at table, the woman cooking, the boy in the corner, and Elias saw him recalculate everything he thought he knew about his employer. "Morning, Jake," Elias said evenly. "This is Mrs. Rivera. She'll be handling the kitchen work now. Her boy, Diego." Jake recovered quick, touched his hat. "Ma'am, that coffee I smell." "Si, yes." Marisol poured him a cup, met his eyes steady. "You take sugar?" "No, ma'am, black's fine." Jake took the cup, inhaled deep. "That's good coffee." The other hands filed in over the next few minutes. Most took their cue from Jake, polite if distant, but Tom Garrett's face went hard when he saw Marisol. Harder still when he noticed Diego. "Didn't know we were hiring breeds," he muttered, just loud enough. The kitchen went quiet. Marisol's back stayed straight, but her hands stilled on the spatula. Diego, sensing trouble the way children do, pressed back in his chair. "You got something to say, Tom?" Elias kept his voice level, but there was iron underneath. Garrett looked around, found no support in the other faces. "Just surprised is all. Thought Rosa suited us fine." "Rosa asked for help. Mrs. Rivera needs work. Seems a good match to me." Elias stood, slow and deliberate. He wasn't a large man, but he'd been working cattle since he was 12. When he wanted to, he could fill a room. "Anyone has a problem with the help I hire, they can find work elsewhere." Silence stretched. Finally. Garrett dropped his eyes, muttered something that might have been agreement. The moment passed. But Elias knew it wasn't over. Men like Garrett didn't change their minds, just bided their time. The hands ate quick and quiet, filed out to their work. Jake lingered, helped himself to more coffee. She cooks better than Rosa, he observed mild-like. That'll help. You think there'll be trouble? Jake shrugged. Always is when things change. But the boys are practical. Good food covers a lot of ground. He paused at the door. Still, might keep an eye on Garrett. He's got friends in town. Likes to talk when he drinks. After Jake left, Elias found himself alone in the kitchen with Marisol and Diego. She was washing dishes, quick and thorough. The boy had found a wooden spoon, was drawing patterns in a small pile of spilled flour. I'm sorry about Garrett, Elias said. Is nothing new. She dried a plate, stacked it precise. Men like him are everywhere. Doesn't make it right. She turned then, looked at him, straight on. Right and wrong are luxury. Food and shelter are not. He had no answer for that. Instead, he watched her work, noted the care she took with everything she touched. When she reached for a high shelf, he saw her wince. Slight, but there. You hurt. Is nothing. But she moved careful after that, favoring her left side. There's a doctor in town. I said is nothing. Sharp now. A wall thrown up quick, then softer. Thank you. He left them to their work, headed out to the corrals, but throughout the morning, he found his attention drifting back to the house. When the lunch triangle rang, he was surprised to realize he'd been watching for it. The noon meal was simple beans, tortillas, salt pork, but Marisol had done something to the beans, added spices that transformed them from sustenance to satisfaction. Even Garrett cleaned his plate, though he made sure not to look at who'd cooked it. Your mother teach you to cook? Elias asked after the hands had gone. He'd lingered, telling himself it was to check the accounts Rosa kept in the kitchen drawer. My grandmother. Marisol was making bread now, her hands sure in the dough. Diego had been tasked with grinding dried chilies, working the pestle with serious concentration. She cooked for a big house in Sonora. Before could mean many things. Before the troubles that drove so many north. Before the Americans came. Before whatever had put her on the road with a small boy and nothing else. Diego's father, he shouldn't ask, but the words came anyway. Dead. Flat. Final. A door closed and locked. I'm sorry. She looked at him then. Really looked. You lost someone too. It wasn't a question. Something in his face. Maybe, or the too quiet house, the empty rooms upstairs. My wife, my daughter, 3 years past. How? Fever. Took them both in 3 days. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Death comes quick sometimes slow. Quick is better. He wondered what slow death she'd seen, but didn't ask. Instead, he watched her hands in the dough, the steady rhythm of kneading. Diego had finished with the chilies, was now carefully sweeping the scattered flour into a small pile. He's a good boy, Elias said. He is everything, fierce and quiet at once. A mother's love distilled to words. That evening, after supper was served and cleaned, Elias found himself on the porch later than usual. The sun was full down, stars beginning to show, when he heard the door open behind him. Soft footsteps. Then Diego appeared at his elbow, small and solemn. Mama says ask if you need anything, the boy said careful, pronouncing each word. I'm fine, son, just watching the stars. Diego looked up, following his gaze. Mama says the stars are souls watching over us. That's a nice thought. My papa is up there? Matter of fact, the way children speak of death. Maybe your little girl, too. Elias's throat went tight. Maybe so. They stood quiet a moment, the big man and the small boy, looking at the endless sky. Then Diego said, Mama is tired but won't say. She works too hard. I'll make sure she rests. Elias promised. "You're good." Diego pronounced this like a judgment rendered, not like the other man. Before Elias could ask what other man, Marisol's voice called soft from inside. Diego scampered off, leaving Elias alone with new questions and the old familiar dark. But for the first time in memory, he didn't stay on the porch until the cold drove him in. Instead, he found himself moving through the house, noting small changes. The kitchen spotless, something simmering on the back of the stove for tomorrow. Fresh wildflowers in a jar on the table. When had she found time to pick those Diego's small shoes set neat by the stairs? Waiting for morning. The house felt different. Still quiet, but a living quiet now, like the pause between heartbeats instead of the silence of the grave. He climbed the stairs, past the closed door to the back rooms. Soft voices filtered through Marisol, singing low in Spanish, a lullaby or prayer. In his own room, getting ready for bed, Elias caught himself listening for those voices, wondering what tomorrow's breakfast might bring, thinking about the way Diego had stood beside him, trusting, and how Marisol's hands had moved so sure despite whatever pain she carried. He'd hired them from pity. He told himself again, Christian charity, nothing more. But when he dreamed that night, it wasn't of Sarah and Margaret. It was of a woman with careful hands and wounded eyes, a boy who thought stars were souls, and a kitchen that smelled of coffee and hope. And somewhere in those dreams, barely acknowledged, was the first stirring of something he'd thought dead and buried with his girls, something that felt dangerously like waiting for morning, waiting to see what new life might walk through his door. The weeks turned with the slow wheel of a ranch life, and the house began to breathe again. Each morning brought small sounds that Elias had forgotten: the scrape of a chair pushed back from the table, water splashing in the wash basin, the soft pad of bare feet on wooden floors. Diego had taken to rising early, slipping down to sit at the kitchen table while his mother worked, chattering in a mix of Spanish and English about his dreams. Elias found himself lingering over breakfast, arriving earlier each day. He told himself it was to review the day's work with Jake, but Jake rarely showed before the coffee was half gone and the eggs growing cold. Instead, it was Marisol he watched, the efficient grace of her movements, the way she hummed under her breath when she thought no one listened. "What's that song?" he asked one morning, surprising them both. She paused, ladle in hand. "Just something my grandmother sang, about a bird looking for home." "Sing it again." She shook her head, but a small smile touched her lips. "Is silly, old women's songs. Please." She looked at him then, something shifting in her dark eyes. When she sang, her voice was low and sweet, the Spanish words flowing like water over stone. Diego joined in on the chorus, his young voice bright against his mother's deeper tones. Elias didn't understand the words, but the melody settled into his chest, warm and aching at once. After that, the morning songs became part of the rhythm. Not every day, but often enough that Elias found himself disappointed when the kitchen was silent. He learned to recognize Marisol's moods by her choice of song bright, quick melodies when she was content, slower ballads when something weighed on her mind. The ranch hands had grown accustomed to her presence, most of them. Tom Garrett still made his displeasure known in small ways, leaving his plate just out of reach, so she had to stretch for it, speaking about her as if she wasn't there. But the others appreciated the improvement in their meals, the way she remembered who liked extra pepper, who couldn't stomach beans. It was a Thursday afternoon when things shifted. Elias had been working with a young stallion, trying to gentle him to saddle. The horse was green-broke and skittish, fighting the bit. He'd lost track of time, the way he did when working horses, until he heard Diego's voice high and frightened from the direction of the house. "Mama, mama, help!" Elias dropped the lead rope, vaulted the corral fence. He ran toward the sound, found Diego in the kitchen garden, tears streaming down his face. Marisol knelt among the tomato plants, her face gray with pain, one hand pressed to her side. What happened? Elias dropped beside her, saw the dark stain spreading beneath her fingers. She fell. Diego sobbed. The bad man pushed her and she fell on the tools. What bad man? But even as he asked, Elias heard bootsteps behind him. Tom Garrett stood in the garden gate, his face flushed with drink, though it was barely past noon. Didn't push nobody. Garrett slurred. Just told her to mind her place. Not my fault she's clumsy. Rage rose in Elias like a flash flood. But Marisol's hand caught his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. It's not bad, she whispered. Just help me inside. He lifted her careful, felt her bite back a sound of pain. She was lighter than he'd expected, all wire and will. Diego ran ahead, pulling cushions from chairs, spreading them on the kitchen floor. Elias laid her down gentle. Saw now the gash along her ribs where she'd fallen against the hoe. Diego, run to the bunkhouse. Find Jake. Tell him to ride for Dr. Morrison. The boy flew out the door. Elias turned back to Marisol, started to lift her blouse to see the wound better. No, she caught his hand, is not proper. Proper be damned. You're bleeding. But she was already struggling to sit up, reaching for the dish towels. He helped her press them against the wound. Watch the white cloth bloom red. What did Garrett say to you? Nothing important. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Men say things. Marisol. She looked at him then, and he saw more than pain in her face. He saw fear, old and deep. He said I should be grateful, that a woman like me, that I owed more than cooking. Her voice dropped. I told him no. He didn't like that. Cold fury settled in Elias's gut. He stood, headed for the door. Where are you going? Marisol struggled to rise. To deal with Garrett. No. The desperation in her voice stopped him. Please, you fire him. His friends make trouble. For you, for us. I know these men, know what they do. I won't have him on my land. Then let him go quiet. Say work is slow. No need for so many hands. She was breathing hard, sweat beading her forehead. Please, I can't. We can't run again. Again. The word hung between them. Before Elias could ask, Jake burst through the door, took in the scene with a quick glance. Doc's coming, he said. What happened? Garrett happened. Elias helped Marisol lie back down. He's in the garden. Drunk. Get him off my property. Tell him his pay's at the bank, and if I see him again, I'll shoot him for trespassing. Jake nodded. No questions asked. Through the window, Elias watched him collect Garrett, who was already starting to sober up enough to look worried. They disappeared toward the bunkhouse, Garrett stumbling and complaining. Dr. Morrison arrived within the hour, a competent man who'd learned his trade in the war between the states. He cleared the kitchen, examined Marisol with professional detachment. Nasty gash, but clean, he pronounced. Lucky it missed anything vital. I'll stitch it. Leave some laudanum for the pain. Elias waited on the porch with Diego. The boy pressed against his side. Neither spoke. When the doctor emerged, wiping his hands, he gave Elias a long look. She'll heal fine if she rests. And I mean rest, no lifting, no reaching, minimal movement for a week at least. He paused. She's got other scars, older ones. That woman's been through hard times. She's under my protection now. The doctor nodded slowly. Good, she'll need it. There's talk in town already about you hiring her. Garrett won't help matters. After the doctor left, Elias found Marisol propped up in bed in her small room. Diego curled beside her like a worried puppy. She looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way she never allowed when standing. Thank you, she said quietly. For the doctor. For Garrett. Should have dealt with him sooner. Elias stood awkward in the doorway, hat in hands. I'll have Rosa come stay. Help with the work. No. She tried to sit straighter, winced. I can... You can rest, like the doc said. That's an order. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. You giving orders now? My house, my rules. Si, patron. But there was warmth in it, not mockery. He started to leave. Stopped. What you said about running again. Marisol. If there's something I should know. Someone looking for you. She was quiet so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, Diego's father was American, soldier at Fort Stanton. He made promises, then went back to his white wife. Her brothers didn't like that he'd left a half-breed bastard behind. The words came flat, matter of fact, but Elias heard the pain underneath. They came one night, said they'd take Diego, raise him proper, white. She pulled her son closer. I ran. Been running since... How long? 2 years. 2 years on the road. A woman alone with a small child. No wonder she'd been desperate enough to take work from a stranger. You're safe here, Elias said firmly. Both of you. Safe is a word I don't know anymore. Then learn it again. That night, Elias sat at his desk but couldn't focus on the ledgers. Instead, he found himself at the window, watching the squares of light from the back rooms. He could hear movement up there, Diego's voice, Marisol's quieter responses. Alive sounds. Family sounds. Rosa came the next morning, full of indignation about Garrett and sympathy for Marisol. She took over the kitchen with her usual bustle, but Elias noticed her portions were smaller than Marisol's, her seasoning heavier-handed. The ranch hands noticed too, though none complained. She's got a gift, Rosa admitted grudgingly, sampling the pot of beans Marisol had started the night before. These are better than mine, and I've been making beans 40 years. Elias spent more time than necessary around the house that week. He told himself he was keeping an eye on things, making sure Marisol followed doctor's orders. But the truth was simpler. He was waiting for her to appear in the kitchen, waiting for Diego's bright chatter, waiting for the songs that had stopped since the incident with Garrett. On the 4th day, he found her sitting on the back steps, watching Diego chase grasshoppers in the yard. She still moved carefully, but color had returned to her cheeks. Shouldn't you be resting? Fresh air is good medicine. She shifted to make room, an invitation he accepted. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the boy play. He's not afraid here, she said eventually. First time in 2 years he plays like a child. You could stay permanent. The house needs... He stopped, started again. I mean, the work's steady. Because the house needs... There was something in her voice, a question underneath the question. The house needs life in it, he said finally. Been too long empty. She turned to look at him, those dark eyes seeing too much. And the man who owns the house? The question hung between them, delicate as morning frost. Elias felt words rising about waiting at windows, about songs in the kitchen, about the way the house had started to feel like home again. But it was too soon, too fragile. The man's been empty too long too, he said quietly. She nodded, understanding more than he'd said. Her hand rested on the step between them, and he covered it with his own. Just for a moment, just long enough to feel the calluses that matched his own, the strength in those small fingers. Diego's laugh rang across the yard, bright and careless, and Elias thought maybe, just maybe, empty things could fill again. Maybe dead things could learn to live. Maybe a house could become a home, and a man who'd forgotten how to wait for anything good could remember what hope felt like. The sun climbed higher, warming their faces, and they sat there, not talking, not needing to, while the world turned on and the small boy played and the future hung before them. Uncertain, but no longer impossible. The trouble started on a Saturday market day in town. Elias had driven in for supplies, leaving Marisol to manage the ranch kitchen. She was fully healed now, moving with her old quick grace, though he sometimes caught her pressing a hand to her side when she thought no one was looking. He was loading sacks of flour into the wagon when Bill Patterson approached. Patterson ran the general store. Had known Elias since he'd first arrived in the territory 15 years back. Elias. Patterson's greeting was stiff, his usual friendliness absent. Bill. Elias hefted another sack, waited. Heard you had some trouble out at your place. Tom Garrett's been talking. Garrett was drunk and attacked one of my workers. He's lucky I only fired him. Patterson shifted his weight. Wouldn't meet Elias's eyes. That's not how he tells it. Says you've taken up with a Mexican woman, that you're keeping her and her half-breed boy in your house. The words were ugly in the morning air. Elias set down the flour sack, slow and careful, turned to face Patterson full on. I hired a cook and housekeeper. She lives in the servants' quarters with her son, same as any hired help. Come now, Elias, you know it ain't the same, not with her kind. Patterson lowered his voice. Look, I'm trying to help. There's talk. The Cattlemen's Association meets next week. Some members think you're setting a bad example. Example of what treating workers fair. You know what I mean. Patterson's face reddened. We've got to maintain standards. Keep the lines clear. It's hard enough keeping order out here without men like you blurring things. The only line I care about is between right and wrong. Elias turned back to his loading. And any man who'd turn away a woman and child in need is on the wrong side of it. Patterson left without another word. But Elias knew this wasn't over. The Cattlemen's Association carried weight in the territory. They could make life difficult for a man who didn't follow their unwritten rules. He drove home troubled, found more trouble waiting. 3 riders sat their horses in his front yard, Mike Garrett, Tom's younger brother, and 2 men Elias recognized as hands from the Double Bar Ranch. All 3 were armed, though their rifles stayed in their scabbards. Afternoon. Carter, Mike Garrett called out. He was smarter than his brother, which made him more dangerous. Get off my land. Now, that's not neighborly. We're just here to talk. Mike's smile was cold. About your new help. Marisol appeared in the doorway. Diego behind her. She took in the scene, started to retreat, but Mike's voice stopped her. No need to hide. Senora, this concerns you. State your business or leave, Elias said, moving to put himself between the riders and the porch. Simple enough. The woman and her boy need to move on. Today. Mike leaned forward in his saddle. Tom told us what she is, what she's doing here. We don't want her kind corrupting the territory. She's cooking meals and keeping house. Nothing more. That's not what it looks like. One of the other riders spat tobacco juice near the porch. Mexican woman living in a white man's house. We all know what that means. Elias's hand moved toward his hip. Remembered he'd left his gun belt in the wagon. But Marisol stepped forward, head high despite the fear he could see in her eyes. I work for Mr. Carter, she said clearly. I cook, I clean, I mend, nothing else. Mike laughed. Ugly sound. Sure you do. Chica, just like all the others who work for white men. He looked back at Elias. She goes, or things get unpleasant, for everyone. You threatening me. Stating facts. Accidents happen on ranches. Cattle go missing. Wells get poisoned. Buildings catch fire. Mike's smile widened. Terrible things. Accidents. Jake Morrison emerged from the barn, rifle in hand. 2 more ranch hands flanked him. The odds shifted, and Mike noticed. Think on it. Carter, he said, wheeling his horse. The woman leaves easy, or she leaves hard. Your choice. After they'd gone, Elias found Marisol in the kitchen, packing her few belongings into the same bundle she'd arrived with. Diego sat at the table, tears running silent down his cheeks. What are you doing? Leaving. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. Is better for you. Like hell. He caught her hands, stilled them. You're not going anywhere. You heard them. They'll hurt you. Hurt the ranch. She pulled away. I've brought enough trouble. The trouble was here before you came. Men like the Garretts don't need an excuse to be cruel. He moved to block her path to the door. This is your home now. Both of you. Home. She said it like a foreign word. I don't know this word anymore. Then I'll teach you. The way you're teaching me. She looked up at him then, and he saw she was crying too, silent as her son. Teaching you what? How to live again. How to want morning to come. The words came hard but true. This house was a tomb before you came. Now it's what? Now it's where I wait for you. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Marisol's tears came faster now, and Elias did something he hadn't done since Sarah died. He pulled another person into his arms, held her while she shook with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and long buried. Diego crept over, wrapped his small arms around them both, and they stood there, the three of them, while afternoon light slanted through the windows and the world outside made its threats and demands. When Marisol finally pulled back, her face was swollen but calmer. They won't stop. The Garretts, the others. They'll make you choose. Already chose. Elias wiped her cheek with his thumb. Gentle. Chose the day I asked you to stay. That evening, he called all the hands together. Most had heard about the afternoon's visit. He stood before them, these men who'd worked his land, some for years. You all know there's been talk, he began, about Mrs. Rivera and her boy, about my judgment in hiring them. He paused, met each man's eyes. Any man who can't work for an outfit that treats all people decent is free to collect his pay and go, no hard feelings. Silence. Then Jake stepped forward. I've ridden for you 8 years. Boss, never known you to do wrong by anyone. That's good enough for me. One by one, the others nodded agreement. All but 2 Sam Houston and Pete Daniels, both young men with ties to town. They looked at each other, then at the ground. We'll collect our pay, Sam said quietly. No offense meant. None taken. See Jake for what you're owed? After they left, Elias did a count. 8 hands remaining, plus Jake. Enough to work the ranch if they worked harder. It would do. The next few days passed tense but quiet. Elias took to wearing his gun belt even around the house. Noticed Jake had the men riding in pairs. Marisol went about her work, but startled at unexpected sounds, kept Diego close. It was Diego who saw them first, the night they came. He'd been put to bed but crept down for water, peered out the kitchen window. Mama. His whisper was sharp with fear. Men outside. Lots of men. Elias was already moving, checking the loads in his rifle. Through the window, he could see torches moving through the darkness. 12 riders at least, maybe more. Take Diego upstairs, he told Marisol. Lock yourselves in and stay down. No. She was already reaching for the shotgun he kept by the door. This is our home too. There wasn't time to argue. The riders were spreading out, surrounding the house. Mike Garrett's voice carried through the night. Carter, send out the woman and boy. This is your last chance. Elias stepped onto the porch, rifle ready. Jake and 3 hands emerged from the bunkhouse, armed and alert. The odds were bad, but not impossible. Any man sets foot on my porch dies there. Elias called out, That's my last chance to you. Someone laughed, harsh. You gonna die for a Mexican whore? Carter. The word had barely left the man's mouth when Marisol's shotgun boomed from the doorway. The rider's hat flew off, and he clutched his ear, howling. The next one won't miss, she said calmly. For a moment, everything balanced on a knife's edge. Then hoofbeats sounded from the road. Sheriff Ben Foster rode into the yard, badge glinting in the torchlight. Behind him came 6 deputies, all armed. Evening, gentlemen, Foster said mildly. Seems like a lot of fuss for a social call. Mike Garrett turned his horse to face the sheriff. Just conducting some community business. Ben. That's so because from where I sit, looks like harassment and attempted assault. Foster's mild tone didn't change, but his hand rested on his pistol. Maybe criminal conspiracy too. That's prison time. You taking his side? Someone called from the back of the mob. Against your own kind. I'm taking the law's side. Foster replied. Now you boys have 2 minutes to disperse. After that, I start making arrests. And I've got plenty of room in my jail. The mob milled, uncertain. They'd expected many things, but not the law standing against them. Finally, Mike Garrett spat in the dirt. This isn't over. Carter. Yes, it is, Sheriff Foster said. Any man here bothers Mr. Carter or his employees again, he'll answer to me, and I'm not near as patient as Carter is. One by one, the riders peeled away, torches disappearing into the darkness. Foster waited until the last hoofbeat faded, then dismounted. Coffee on? He asked Elias. Long ride from town. They sat at the kitchen table, Elias, Foster, Marisol, even Diego, who refused to be separated from his mother. The sheriff was an old man, had kept the peace in the territory for 20 years through force of will and careful politics. Heard about the fuss this afternoon, he said, accepting a cup from Marisol with a nod of thanks. Figured Garrett might try something stupid. He sipped, appreciative. This is good coffee, ma'am. Gracias. Thank you. Foster studied her a moment, then looked at Elias. You know this won't be the end. Garrett's got friends, and there's plenty who think like him. I know. Could make things easier if the lady and her boy moved on. I'd make sure they got wherever they're going safe. No. Marisol's voice was quiet but firm. We stay. Foster nodded slowly. Then you've got my protection, for what it's worth, but you'll need to be careful. All of you. After the sheriff left, they sat in the kitchen's warmth, the three of them around the table like a family, like they belonged together. Why? Marisol asked finally. Why you risk so much for us? Elias thought about it, about all the ways he could answer. In the end, he chose the simplest truth. Because when you're here, I'm not just waiting to die anymore. I'm waiting to live. She reached across the table, took his hand. Diego yawned, leaned against his mother's side, and outside, the night grew quiet again. The danger passed for now. But inside, in the kitchen where songs were sung and meals were shared, where a dead man was learning to live and a running woman was learning to stay, inside was warmth and light and something that might, someday, dare to call itself love. The night they took Diego, the moon was dark. Later, Elias would think that should have warned him how the darkness seemed thicker, how even the coyotes stayed silent. But he'd grown comfortable in the weeks since Sheriff Foster's intervention, let his guard slip as autumn deepened into winter. He woke to Marisol's scream, raw and primal. By the time he reached the kitchen, she was on her knees in the doorway of Diego's small room, his empty bed a mockery of their peace. They took him, she gasped, clutching a piece of paper. They took my boy. The note was simple. The half-breed goes to Fort Stanton, better life with his own kind, don't follow. Elias was already pulling on his boots, checking his rifle. How long? I don't know. I just woke, felt something wrong. She was shaking but dry-eyed, fury burning through the shock. His window, open, they came like thieves. Jake appeared in the doorway, took in the scene with one glance. I'll saddle the horses. 3 men, Elias said, reading the boot prints beneath Diego's window. Few hours head start, moving slow with a child. Jake, take 2 men, ride for the sheriff. Rest of you, guard the house. I'm coming, Marisol said. You'll slow us down. Her eyes flashed dangerous. Try to stop me. There wasn't time to argue. Elias saddled her a steady mare while she changed into riding clothes, men's pants and jacket she'd mended for the hands. When she emerged, she'd bound her hair tight, strapped a knife to her belt. She looked like what she was, a mother ready to kill for her child. They rode hard through the pre-dawn darkness, following tracks by lantern light. The kidnappers had headed north, toward the military road that led to Fort Stanton. If they reached the fort, claimed Diego was an orphaned Indian child, the army would take him, send him to one of those schools where they cut children's hair and beat their language out of them. "Tell me about his father," Elias said as they rode. He'd never asked for details before. "Lieutenant James Morrison." Her voice was steady despite their pace. "Stationed at Fort Stanton. He was kind. At first, said he loved me, would marry me when his tour ended." She laughed, bitter. "I was young, believed him." "What happened?" "His wife arrived from Pennsylvania. White woman, proper woman. He'd never mentioned her. The words came clipped, matter of fact. When she learned about Diego, about me, she sent her brothers. Said they'd take Diego, raise him white and Christian. I ran that night." "These men, now could they be the brothers?" "Maybe, or maybe just men who think like them. Does it matter?" It didn't. What mattered was the tracks growing fresher, the distance closing. As dawn broke gray across the desert, Elias spotted dust ahead. 3 riders, one carrying a small, struggling bundle. "Diego!" Marisol's cry carried across the distance. The riders turned, saw them coming, spurred their horses faster. But they'd made a mistake. Heading into Box Canyon country, Elias knew this land, had hunted these draws and washes for years. He led Marisol up a game trail, cutting across the riders' path. They emerged on a ridge just as the kidnappers entered a narrow canyon below. "Stay here," Elias said, dismounting. "Like hell." They descended on foot, quick and quiet. The kidnappers had stopped to rest, confident they'd lost any pursuit. Diego sat on a rock, hands tied, face streaked with tears but chin high, his mother's son, stubborn in his fear. Elias recognized 2 of the men cowboys from the double bar, the same outfit Mike Garrett's friends worked. The third was a stranger, older, with the bearing of a soldier. "Told you to gag the brat," the soldier was saying. "His caterwauling will bring every Apache in 50 miles. "Let them come," one of the cowboys said. "Save us the trouble of taking him to the fort." Marisol made a sound, low and murderous. Elias touched her arm, pointed to the canyon walls. She understood, began working her way around while he moved to block the canyon mouth. He stepped into view, rifle ready. "Morning, gentlemen." The men scrambled for weapons, but Elias already had the drop. "Hands high and empty, or I start shooting." "You got no right," the soldier said, but he raised his hands. "We're taking an abandoned child to proper authorities." "That child has a mother, and you're kidnappers." Elias moved closer, keeping them covered. "Diego, you hurt." "No, sir." The boy's voice was small but steady. "I knew you'd come. Mama too." "That's right, son. Your mama's here." That's when the soldier made his move, diving for his pistol. The shot came from above Marisol's rifle, cracking sharp in the morning air. The soldier's gun flew from his hand as he clutched his shoulder, cursing. Marisol appeared on the rocks above them, rifle steady. "Next one goes through your heart," she told the wounded man. "Touch my son again. Find out." The fight went out of them then. Elias tied the uninjured men while Marisol cut Diego free, held him tight. The boy buried his face in her shoulder, finally letting himself cry. "Mama, I was scared." "I know, mi amor, but you were brave, so brave." They were deciding what to do with the kidnappers when Jake arrived with Sheriff Foster and 4 deputies. The sheriff took in the scene, sighed heavy. "Garrett brothers?" he asked. "They're friends. This one's army, or was." Elias indicated the wounded soldier. Foster examined the man's papers, whistled low. "Captain Richard Morrison, retired, Pennsylvania address." He looked at Marisol. "This name mean anything to you?" Her face had gone still. Morrison. Could be coincidence. Could be. Foster clearly didn't believe it. Captain, you want to explain why you're kidnapping children in my territory? Morrison stayed silent. But one of the cowboys broke. Garrett said there was good money in it. Said the captain wanted his nephew back. Would pay well. Diego is not his nephew, Marisol said coldly. His brother abandoned us. They have no claim. That's for a judge to decide, Foster said. But kidnapping's kidnapping. These men are going to prison. He studied Marisol carefully. Ma'am, if there's legal claim to the boy, they might try again. Through the courts this time. Let them try, Elias said. I'll hire every lawyer in the territory if needed. Foster nodded slowly. Might not come to that. Captain Morrison here crossed some serious lines. His family might prefer to avoid the scandal. He gestured to his deputies. Load them up. We've got a long ride to town. They watched the deputies lead the kidnappers away. Morrison turned back once, hatred clear in his eyes. This isn't over, he called. The boy belongs with his own kind. He is with his own kind, Marisol replied. People who love him. The ride home was slow, Diego drowsing against his mother despite the horse's movement. Elias led Marisol's mount, studying her face. The fierce protector had faded, leaving exhaustion and old pain. You all right? They found us. Her voice was hollow. After 2 years, they found us. They'll keep coming. Then we'll keep stopping them. You can't fight the whole world for us. Elias, watch me. She looked at him then, something shifting in her dark eyes. Why do you care so much? He thought of all the careful words he might say. Instead, he spoke simple truth. Because I love him, and I love you. The words hung in the desert air, stark and honest. Marisol's breath caught, tears starting fresh down her cheeks. You don't know what you're saying. A white man, a Mexican woman. A man and a woman. Elias corrected. Everything else is just other people's noise. They rode in silence after that. But when they reached the ranch, Marisol let him lift her from the saddle, let him hold her a moment longer than necessary. Diego stirred, reached for Elias as naturally as he reached for his mother. Home, the boy asked sleepily. Home, Elias confirmed, carrying him inside. That night, after Diego was safely tucked in bed with 3 ranch hands taking turns at guard, Elias found Marisol on the porch. She'd wrapped herself in a shawl against the cold, stood looking at the stars. My grandmother used to say the stars were God's promises, she said as he joined her, that each one was a hope he held for us. What do you hope for? She was quiet so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, I used to hope just to survive, for Diego to live another day. But now, she turned to face him. Now I hope for impossible things. Like what? Like a home that stays, like a man who sees me, not just what I am, but who, like a place where my son can grow up proud of both his names. Her voice dropped. Like love that doesn't care about blood or borders. Elias reached for her hand, drew her close. Those aren't impossible things. They're right here. The world won't let us have them. You saw today. I saw a mother fight for her child. I saw a boy brave as any man. I saw us win. He tilted her chin up, met her eyes. The world can go to hell. This is our place, our choice. You really think it's that simple? No, but I think it's that important. He touched her face gently. Worth fighting for. Worth any cost. She searched his eyes, looking for doubt, for anything less than certainty. Finding none. She rose on her toes, pressed her lips to his. Soft, careful. A question and answer both. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with tears and something else. Hope. Maybe that dangerous thing she'd thought killed. I love you too, she whispered. God help me, I fought it, but I love you too. They stood together on the porch, holding each other while the stars made their promises overhead. Inside, Diego slept safe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats. The Garretts wouldn't give up. Morrison's family might come. The world would keep trying to tear them apart. But tonight, they had this: a woman and a man, a child loved by both, a house becoming home, a family forming from the broken pieces of their separate griefs. It wasn't simple, but it was theirs. And in the wild territories of 1878 sometimes, that was miracle enough. The fire started small, just after midnight. They'd been having what passed for a normal evening, Diego working his letters at the kitchen table, while Marisol mended shirts and Elias reviewed the month's accounts. It was Jake's sharp whistle from the yard that alerted them. "Fire in the barn!" Elias was out the door before the words finished echoing. Orange flames licked at the hay storage, spreading fast in the dry winter air. The horses were screaming, trapped in their stalls. "Diego, stay with your mother!" Elias shouted, but Marisol was already pushing her son toward Rosa, who'd appeared from her room. "Watch him," Marisol ordered, grabbing a bucket. "Don't let him follow." The ranch hands formed a bucket line from the well, but the fire was spreading too fast. Elias plunged into the smoke-filled barn, Jake beside him. They worked by feel and instinct, unlatching stalls, driving terrified horses out into the night. The heat was suffocating, the smoke thick as wool. "That's the last of them," Jake coughed, stumbling toward the door. But Elias heard something, not a horse's scream, but something else. A laugh, low and mean, from behind the barn. He circled around, saw a figure silhouetted against the flames. Mike Garrett, holding a torch, heading for the house. Rage gave Elias strength. He tackled Garrett from behind, both men rolling in the dirt. The torch flew wide, landed harmlessly in bare ground. They fought savage. No rules, no mercy, fists and boots and teeth. Garrett was younger, but Elias had desperation driving him. Marisol and Diego were in that house. A gunshot split the night. Both men froze. Sheriff Foster stood 10 feet away, pistol aimed skyward, 5 deputies spreading out behind him. "That's enough," Foster said. "Mike Garrett, you're under arrest for arson and attempted murder." "You can't prove nothing." Garrett spat blood, grinned through split lips. "Could have been anyone." "Could have been," Foster agreed. "Except we've been watching you for 3 days. Saw you buy the kerosene. Saw you sneak onto Carter land." He nodded to his deputies. "Take him." As they dragged Garrett away, he twisted to glare at Elias. "You think this ends it? There's more coming. That Mexican witch and her bastard will never be safe here." The barn was beyond saving, collapsing in a shower of sparks. But the house stood untouched, and no lives were lost, human or animal. Elias found Marisol by the well, soot-streaked and coughing but whole. She fell against him, let him hold her while the flames reflected in her dark eyes. "It's never going to stop," she whispered. "They'll keep coming until they're all in prison or run out of territory." Elias's voice was hard. "I'm done being patient, done being reasonable. They want a war, they'll get one." Dawn found them salvaging what they could from the ruins. Diego helped, small hands carrying water to the horses, now corralled in the far pasture. The boy hadn't spoken since the fire, but he stayed close to both adults, needing their presence. It was full morning when unexpected visitors arrived. A fancy carriage, out of place on the rough ranch roads. From it stepped a woman in city clothes, mid-40s, steel-gray hair, posture like a general. Behind her, a younger man Elias recognized with a chill. Lieutenant James Morrison, Diego's father. Marisol went rigid beside him. "No." "A Mrs. Rivera," the woman said coolly. "I am Helen Morrison, James's wife. We need to discuss the boy." "There's nothing to discuss." Marisol stepped forward, but Elias caught her arm. "Let's hear them out," he said quietly. "Better to know what we're facing." They gathered in the front parlor territory Elias chose deliberately. His house, his ground. Helen Morrison sat primly, taking in the good furniture with calculating eyes. Her husband stood behind her chair like a trained dog. "I'll be direct," Helen began. "We want the boy. My husband's indiscretion resulted in a child who deserves better than this." Her gaze swept dismissively over Marisol. "We can provide education, position, a future." "He has a future," Marisol said. "With me, his mother." "His mixed-blood mother? You mean living unwed in a white man's house?" Helen's smile was razor-thin. "What kind of example is that? What kind of life?" "A loved life," Elias interjected. "Which is more than you're offering?" Helen turned her cold eyes on him. "Mr. Carter, I understand you've developed some attachment to these people, but surely you see the impropriety, the danger to your reputation." "My reputation's my concern." "Is it?" Helen produced papers from her bag. "I've been making inquiries. You're behind on your association fees. Several contracts for cattle sales have been mysteriously delayed. Your credit at the Territorial Bank is under review." She smiled again. "Amazing how much influence the right connections can wield." "You're threatening me." "I'm offering a solution. The boy comes with us, and your troubles disappear. You can keep your housekeeper, if you must. Though I'd recommend she move on as well." Through all this, James Morrison hadn't spoken, hadn't even looked at Marisol or Diego, who watched from the doorway despite orders to stay away. Now Marisol stood, crossed to him. "Look at him," she said quietly. "Look at your son." James flinched but raised his eyes. Diego stood straight, meeting his father's gaze with that steady courage that broke Elias's heart. "I don't know you," Diego said clearly. "But Mama told me you were my father. Why did you leave us?" James started, stopped. His wife's hand tightened on her chair arm. "Answer him," Marisol pressed. "Tell him why his father abandoned him. Tell him why he wasn't worth staying for." "That's enough," Helen snapped. "James had duties, obligations. To you," Marisol finished. "Yes, I know. A proper white wife takes precedence over promises to a Mexican woman." "You knew what you were," Helen said coldly. "A diversion, nothing more. The fact that you trapped him with a child?" The slap cracked like a whip. Helen reeled back, hand to her cheek, as Marisol stood over her, trembling with fury. "I was 17, Marisol said, each word precise as a blade. He was 30. He promised marriage, swore love, took what he wanted. When I told him about the baby, he seemed happy until you arrived." "How dare you?" "No!" Elias's voice cut through. "How dare you? Coming into my house, threatening my family, trying to steal a child from his mother." He stood, and something in his face made James Morrison step back. "You have 1 minute to leave my property." "You're making a mistake," Helen said, but she was already moving toward the door. "We have lawyers, influence." "And I have friends among the Apache," Elias said conversationally. "Men who owe me favors, who don't much care for child stealers. Amazing how people can just disappear in this territory." It was a bluff, mostly, but Helen Morrison paled, grabbed her husband's arm. At the door, James turned back, finally meeting Diego's eyes. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." "It's worth nothing," Diego replied, 5 years old and already wise to the world's cruelties. "I have a papa now, a real one." James flinched like he'd been struck, followed his wife out. Their carriage raised dust departing. And good riddance. That evening, they sat among the ruins of the barn, planning. The ranch hands had stayed loyal through everything, but Elias could see the strain. Fighting the Garretts was one thing. Taking on powerful Eastern families was another. "We could leave," Marisol said quietly. Go somewhere they can't find us. No more running, Elias said firmly. This is our home. But the cost is worth it. He pulled her close. Diego between them. Some things you don't surrender, no matter the price. Jake approached, hat in hand. Boss, there's something else. Riders coming. Lots of them. Elias reached for his rifle, but Jake shook his head. Not that kind of riders. It's the Apache, White Elk's band. White Elk was an old friend, a man Elias had traded with for years, had shared water and shelter with in hard times. The Apache made camp just beyond the ranch boundary, and White Elk himself rode in as the sun set. Heard you had trouble, the Apache leader said without preamble. Saw the smoke, came to see. They sat by the ruins of the barn, shared coffee and truth. White Elk listened without comment until Elias finished. This woman, this boy, they are your family now. Yes. Then they are under Apache protection too. White Elk studied Marisol. Diego, the boy has warrior's eyes. His mother, warrior's heart. They belong here, on this land. He stood. Decision made. We will camp close for a time. Let these eastern whites learn what it means to threaten those the Apache call friend. After he left, Marisol was quiet for a long time. Why would they do this, risk themselves for us? Because that's what people do. Elias said, real people, good people. They stand up for what's right. Even when it costs everything. Especially then. That night, despite everything, or perhaps because of it, they ended up in the kitchen. All three of them. Marisol made hot chocolate with the last of their stores, and they drank it sweet and dark while Diego drowsed between them. We're going to survive this, Elias said. It wasn't a question. Together, Marisol agreed. She sang then, soft and low, the lullaby her grandmother had taught her, about a bird that flew through storms and fire, always finding its way home. Diego mumbled sleepily. Sing the brave bird song, Mama. I am mi amor, the bird who is small but fierce, who builds its nest where eagles fear to fly. Elias listened, understood. They were that bird small against the storm but fierce in their determination. They'd lost a barn tonight but kept what mattered. Family, home, each other. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and threats, powerful enemies and uncertain friends. But tonight, in their kitchen that smelled of chocolate and hope, they were just three souls making a stand against a world that said they couldn't be together. The world, Elias thought as Diego's breathing deepened into sleep, could go to hell. This was worth any fight, any cost. And watching Marisol's face in the lamplight, soft with love for her son and, yes, for him too, he knew she felt the same. They were no longer waiting at windows or running from shadows. They were standing their ground, together, come what may. The letter from the Territory Commissioner arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by special courier. Elias read it twice before the words sank in. The ranch was being investigated for harboring unregistered persons of mixed heritage and violation of territorial settlement codes. He had 10 days to comply with removal orders or face legal action. It's the Morrisons, Jake said, reading over his shoulder. They've got connections in the territorial government. Elias crumpled the paper. Through the window, he could see Marisol hanging laundry while Diego played with a wooden horse Jake had carved for him. Such a simple scene, yet now threatened by distant men with papers and power. We knew this was coming, he said quietly. Time to fight back. But the fight proved harder than expected. Their lawyer in town, old Sam Winters, shook his head after reviewing the documents. They're using the Indian Removal Acts, claiming Diego is unregistered Apache. It's thin, but with the right judge. He's not Apache, Elias argued. His mother is Mexican, his father white. A mixed blood is mixed blood to them, and Marisol being here unmarried. Winters spread his hands. They're painting a picture of moral corruption, unfit environment for a child. What are our options? The old lawyer was quiet for a moment. Few and far between, unless— He looked at Elias carefully. Marriage would change things. A legal union, proper adoption papers for the boy. Harder to separate a legal family. That evening, Elias found Marisol in the garden, working by last light. She'd been quiet since the letter arrived. That stillness that meant she was planning to run again. "We need to talk," he said. "I know." She didn't look up from the tomatoes she was tying. "I'll leave tonight. Take Diego somewhere they can't— Marry me." The words hung in the air between them. Marisol's hand stilled on the plants. "What?" "Marry me," Elias repeated. Steadier now. "Make it legal, what we already are. Make them fight a husband for his wife, a father for his son." She turned then, dirt on her hands, tears on her cheeks. "You would do this tie yourself to us by law, not just feeling." "Marisol, I'm already tied to you. By love, by choice, by every morning I wake up grateful you're here. The law's just paper, but if paper's what we need to keep our family together, then let's use it. People will talk. Your name, your standing, are worth nothing without you and Diego." He stepped closer, took her earth-stained hands in his. "I'm not asking out of pity or strategy. I'm asking because I love you, because I can't imagine any life but this one, together." She searched his face, that careful way she had of looking past words to truth. "The world won't suddenly accept us because of a marriage certificate." "No, but it's harder to tear apart what law has joined." He touched her face gently. "And I want to call you wife. Want Diego to carry my name if he'll have it. Want what we've built to be recognized, even if some folks don't like it." "Elias!" Her voice broke on his name. "Say yes," he whispered. "Not for them, for us. Say yes because you love me too." "Yes." It came out fierce, tear-thick but certain. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it." They were married 3 days later in the courthouse. Sheriff Foster and his wife as witnesses. Marisol wore her best dress, simple blue cotton, but Elias thought she'd never looked more beautiful. Diego stood between them, solemn as a judge, carrying the rings on a ribbon. The judge, old Charlie Banks, had known Elias for years. He performed the ceremony quick but kind, and if he had opinions about mixed marriages, he kept them to himself. "By the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico," Judge Banks intoned, "I pronounce you man and wife, and this young man," he ruffled Diego's hair, "officially has a legal father." Diego looked up at Elias. "Do I call you Papa now?" "If you want to." The boy considered this seriously. "Papa Elias," he decided, "because I had a father, but now I have a papa." After the ceremony, they filed adoption papers, making it official. Diego Rivera Carter, as legal as law could make him. It felt like victory, but Elias knew it was just the first battle. They were walking to the wagon when riders appeared, a full troop of cavalry from Fort Stanton, led by a captain Elias didn't recognize. "Mr. Carter." The captain dismounted. "I'm Captain Warren. I have orders to inspect your property for illegal inhabitants." "On whose authority?" Sheriff Foster stepped forward. "Territorial Commissioner Hayes." Warren produced papers. "We've received reports of Apache harboring possible rebel elements." "The only Apache on my land are there by invitation," Elias said evenly. "White Elk's band. Peaceful traders. Nothing illegal about it." "We'll determine that." Warren's eyes found Marisol, narrowed. "This your wife?" "As of an hour ago, yes." Something flickered in the captain's face, surprise, maybe frustration. "And the boy?" "My legal son." Elias showed the adoption papers, all properly filed. Warren studied the documents like he hoped to find forgery. Convenient timing. Legal timing. Judge Banks interjected. He'd followed them out, stood now in his black robes like judgment itself. I perform the ceremony, witness the adoption, everything proper and binding." The captain looked between them, all the judge, the sheriff, the newlywed couple, the small boy holding his mother's hand. "We'll still need to inspect the ranch." "Then follow us." Elias said, "You'll find nothing but a working cattle operation and legal residence." The inspection was thorough and hostile. Soldiers searched every building, questioned every hand. When they reached White Elk's camp at the property's edge, tensions rose sharp. But White Elk met them with calm dignity, produced trading papers years old, proof of his band's peaceful status. "This man," White Elk gestured to Elias, "has been friend to Apache for 15 years. We trade, we share water, we respect boundaries. Where is crime in this?" Captain Warren had no answer. As the sun set, he gathered his men, frustration clear in every line of his body. "This isn't over," he told Elias quietly. "The commissioner wants you broken. He'll find another way." "Let him try." Elias stood with his family behind him, Marisol's hand in his. Diego between them. "We're not going anywhere." After the soldiers left, they gathered in the kitchen. Jake and the hands joined them. Rosa, too, all cramming around the table for an impromptu wedding feast. Someone produced a fiddle, and despite everything, music filled the house. "Dance with me," Elias asked Marisol. "Here now." "Especially now." He pulled her into his arms. "Let them come with their papers and threats. Tonight we celebrate." They danced in the kitchen while Diego clapped time and the hands whooped encouragement. Marisol's eyes shone with tears and joy mixed, and Elias thought he'd never seen anything so beautiful as his wife in lamplight, defying the world with every step. But the world wasn't done with them. Near midnight, as the celebration wound down, hoofbeats thundered into the yard. Elias grabbed his rifle, but it was Sheriff Foster, riding hard. "Trouble," he gasped. "The Morrisons brought more lawyers, federal ones. They're claiming the marriage is invalid, the adoption fraudulent. They've got a judge in Santa Fe ready to issue arrest warrants." On what grounds? Winters had appeared, drawn by the commotion. "Moral turpitude," they're calling it, saying Elias entered into an illegal compact to circumvent territorial law. Foster's face was grim. "They're coming at dawn with a federal marshal." The kitchen went silent. Marisol pulled Diego close, and Elias saw her walls going up again, that preparation to run. "No," he said firmly. "We stand and fight. Winters, what do we need?" The old lawyer's mind was already working. Character witnesses, proof of established household, evidence of proper care for the boy. He looked around the room. How many here would testify? Every hand raised. Jake, the ranch hands, Rosa, even White Elk, who'd entered silent as shadow. "I will speak," the Apache leader said. "Tell them how this man saved my nephew from white slavers, how he shares water in drought, treats all people with honor. Let them argue with Apache truth." "I'll ride to town," Rosa declared. "Wake everyone who's eaten Marisol's cooking, seen how she tends that boy. They want character witnesses, they'll have them." Through the night they prepared, statements written, documents gathered, proof assembled of the life they'd built. As dawn approached, Marisol found Elias on the porch, watching the road. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "this time with you. Being your wife, even for a day, it's been worth everything." "This isn't ending," he said fiercely. "We're not losing. If we do, we won't." He pulled her close. "You're my wife. Diego's my son. This is our land, our life. They want to take it, they'll have to go through me." "Through us," she corrected. "We face this together." The sun rose on their small army ranch hands, armed but hopeful. Apache warriors in silent support. Townspeople Rosa had roused, all standing witness to what Elias and Marisol had built. When the federal marshal arrived with his papers and prejudice, He found not easy victims, but a community united. The battle was far from over, but as Diego stood between his parents, small hand in each of theirs, Elias knew they'd already won the only victory that truly mattered. They were family, legal and true. Everything else was just the world catching up to what love had already declared. The federal marshal stood at their gate like judgment itself, papers clutched in one hand, the other resting on his sidearm. Behind him, a small army of territorial officials and hired guns. But it was the two figures beside him that made Elias's blood run cold. Helen and James Morrison, dressed in mourning black as if already attending a funeral. "Elias Carter," the marshal called out, "by order of the Federal District Court, you are commanded to surrender the minor child known as Diego Rivera for immediate removal to proper guardianship." "His name is Diego Rivera Carter," Elias replied steadily. "He's my legal son." "That adoption is under review for fraud." Helen Morrison stepped forward, triumph in her cold eyes. "As is your marriage, entered into solely to circumvent the law." The crowd behind Elias stirred townspeople, ranch hands, White Elk's warriors. The marshal's men shifted nervous, hands moving to weapons, violence balanced on a knife's edge. Then Marisol stepped forward, Diego's hand in hers. She dressed in her finest, the blue dress from their wedding, and stood straight as any queen. "You want to take my son because his blood is mixed," her voice carried clear across the yard. "Because his mother is Mexican and Indian. Because you think your white Eastern money makes you better parents than the ones who love him?" "We think," Helen said icily, "that a child deserves better than being raised in sin and squalor." That's when Diego pulled free from his mother's hand. 5 years old, small for his age, but he walked toward the Morrisons with his chin high. "I know who you are," he said to James Morrison. "You're the man who left us, who made my mama cry." He stopped just out of reach, fearless. "But you're not my papa. Papa is the one who comes when I have bad dreams, who teaches me to ride, who chose us when you threw us away." James Morrison's face crumpled. "Diego, My name is Diego Rivera Carter," the boy interrupted. "And I choose to stay with my real family." The moment stretched tight. Then Judge Banks pushed through the crowd, still in his traveling clothes from the hard ride. "Marshal Henderson," the judge called out. "What's this about fraud? I performed that marriage myself. Witnessed the adoption. You calling me a liar?" "Judge Banks." The marshal looked uncomfortable. "I have orders, and I have jurisdiction." Banks pulled out his own papers. "Territorial Supreme Court injunction, filed this morning. Any action against the Carter family has stayed pending full hearing." He smiled grimly. Amazing how fast paperwork moves when justice is at stake. Helen Morrison's composure cracked. "You can't do this. We have influence, connections." "And we have truth." It was White Elk who spoke now, stepping from the crowd with 24 warriors behind him. "This man, Elias Carter, is brother to the Apache. His woman and child are under our protection. You want them come through us." The federal officers paled. Fighting locals was one thing. Starting a war with the Apache was another. Sheriff Foster moved to stand beside Elias. "Seems to me this is a matter for the courts, not guns. Why don't we all calm down? Let the law work proper." The marshal looked at his papers, at the armed crowd, at the Apache warriors. He was a practical man, could count odds as well as anyone. "Stand down," he ordered his men. "We'll wait for the court hearing." "This isn't over," Helen hissed at Marisol. "That boy deserves better." "He has better." Marisol's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. "He has love. He has a home. He has parents who would die before letting him go." She stepped closer to Helen, close enough to whisper, "You want to know what your husband whispered in the dark? The promises he made, how he cried when Diego was born. Said he was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, until you arrived and reminded him that Mexican babies don't inherit Eastern fortunes." Helen went white. Behind her, James Morrison looked like a man drowning in his own shame. "Leave," Elias said quietly. "Leave now, and don't come back. Find another fight. This one's done." The Morrisons retreated to their carriage. As they pulled away, James looked back once at Diego, raised his hand in what might have been goodbye or apology. Diego didn't wave back, just pressed closer to Elias's leg. The crowd began to disperse. Crisis averted for now, but Elias knew this was just a reprieve. The hearing would come, and with it more challenges. The barn still lay in ashes. The ranch still bled money from the association's sanctions. The world still said they were wrong to be together. That night, they sat at the kitchen table, their battlefield and sanctuary both. Diego had fallen asleep in Elias's arms, worn out from the day's drama. Marisol traced patterns in spilled flour, her face thoughtful. "We could still leave," she said softly. "Start over somewhere new. California, maybe, or Oregon territory." Elias considered it. A fresh start, new land, away from those who'd always see them as wrong. It had appeal. "Is that what you want?" he asked. She was quiet for a long moment. "I used to think home was a place you could lose. My village in Mexico, gone to war. The rooms I shared with Diego's father, poisoned by lies. Every place I stopped running. Torn away." She looked up at him. "But home isn't a place, is it? It's people. It's choosing to stay even when staying is hard. So we stay. She reached across the table, took his hand. "This is our land. These are our people. Our ghosts live here too. Sarah and Margaret. They're part of this place, part of our story. I won't make you leave them." Elias's throat went tight. He'd never spoken of his fear that leaving would mean abandoning Sarah and Margaret's memory. But Marisol understood, the way she understood all his broken places. "They would have loved you," he said, "both of you." "And I would have loved them. They're part of you, so they're part of us." She squeezed his hand. "We honor the dead by living, by filling this house with love again." Diego stirred, mumbled something about horses. They carried him up to bed together, tucked him in the room that might have been Margaret's, standing there in the doorway, watching their son sleep. Elias felt something shift in his chest. Not the grief leaving that would always be part of him, but the guilt going, the sense that loving again was betrayal. Sarah would have wanted this, would have opened her arms to this brave woman and bright boy, would have fought just as hard to keep them. Over the next days, they prepared for the court hearing. Witnesses came forward, people Elias hadn't expected. The banker who'd seen Marisol teaching Diego his numbers, the minister's wife who'd watched her tend sick ranch hands, even some who'd been cold before, now shamed by the Morrisons' cruelty into choosing sides. The night before, they were to leave for Santa Fe and the hearing. Elias found Marisol in the ruins of the barn. She was poking through the ashes and came up with something blackened but whole, a horseshoe, one of Margaret's pony's shoes he'd kept for memory. "It survived," she said wonderingly. "Strong things do." He took the horseshoe, wiped it clean. "We'll rebuild. Bigger, better. Diego needs a place for his own pony. After the hearing, if we win. When we win." He pulled her close. "We've come too far to lose now." She leaned into him, and they stood among the ashes planning their future. A new barn. Yes, but more. Maybe more children. Brothers and sisters for Diego. Maybe an orchard Marisol had always wanted, fruit trees. Maybe a school for the local children. All the children, regardless of blood or birth. Maybe just life, lived fully and freely, in defiance of those who said they couldn't. The next morning dawned clear and cold. They dressed in their best. Diego complaining about his stiff collar until Marisol distracted him with stories of the train they'd ride to Santa Fe. As they prepared to leave, riders appeared on the horizon, White Elk and his warriors. come to escort them to town. "You don't have to do this," Elias told his old friend. "When family travels to war, warriors ride with them," White Elk replied simply. More horses appeared, Jake and the ranch hands, all in their cleanest clothes. Then wagons from town, Rosa and the minister's wife, the banker and his family, even old Doc Morrison, no relation to the Eastern Morrisons, who delivered hundreds of babies and saved hundreds more. "Quite a parade," Marisol murmured, tears in her eyes. "That's what family does," Elias said. "Shows up." They rode toward town and whatever judgment awaited, but Elias found he wasn't afraid anymore. Win or lose in court, they'd already won everything that mattered. They'd built a family from broken pieces. They'd made a stand for love over law, for choice over blood, for the family you make over the family you're born to. The road stretched ahead, uncertain but no longer impossible. And as Diego started singing one of his mother's Spanish lullabies, as their friends joined in with harmonies learned over kitchen tables and campfires, Elias knew they were heading home, not to a place, but to a truth that love makes its own laws, builds its own walls, creates its own world. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. A man who'd learned to live again, a woman who'd learned to stay, a boy who'd learned he was worth fighting for, a family, legal or not, blessed or not, proper or not. A family whole and true in theirs. The sun climbed higher, blessing their journey. And if anyone noticed the former widower holding his wife's hand like a lifeline, singing Spanish lullabies he barely understood, they were kind enough not to mention it. After all, the West was built on second chances and new beginnings. And sometimes, just sometimes, love really did conquer all. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale, whether you're listening during your commute, relaxing at home, or perhaps on a long drive across your own frontier. Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Elias and Marisol's journey? Your feedback means the world to us and helps us craft more stories that touch your heart.